In today's video, we are going to just break down SOH CAH TOA. What it is and how to use it and how to label your triangles. We're not really going to go into any examples in this video. So this video is basically just explaining what SOH CAH TOA is, because you really need to understand what it is in order for us to be able to use it in examples and equations and to solve a question with it. So the first thing that I'd like us to know is this is used in trigonometry. So I love that unit. So the unit trigonometry, and we use this for triangles, right-angled triangles to be exact. So when you have a triangle something like that looks something like that, you can use SOH CAH TOA to solve for different sides as well as angles in this triangle. So the first thing that I would want us to do is label the triangle, because that is the basics. That's like the basics of the SOH CAH TOA formula, is to know how to label your triangle. So your triangle is labeling your triangle is very dependent on something that we call theta, which is an angle in your triangle. So let me be clearer just in case I'm not clear enough. We have angles right here. Usually this is a 90-degree angle right here, this one right here. And usually we're not going to label that theta, like never. I don't think I've ever seen anyone label the right angle triangle theta, because that spot theta, because we know it's a 90-degree angle. But these two spots right here, either one of those could be theta, and so that's very dependent on how we're going to label this graph. Theta is something like this. It's just pronounced theta. Now, I can decide, or someone can decide to put it here or here. But for this, we're going to put our theta angle up here. Now we're going to label. If you go back to the Pythagorean theorem days, one thing that we know is that this right here, the longest side of your triangle is your hypotenuse. That is not going to change. That side is still going to be your hypotenuse. So this side is going to be hypotenuse. Hopefully I'm spelling that right. That side is always going to be your hypotenuse. Now we have to figure out the other sides. And that's why I said it's dependent on where your theta is. And I'm going to do an example with the theta on the other side. Your theta is right here. We're going to look directly opposite from our theta, which is right here, right? Imagine standing there and looking directly opposite. That side is called your opposite side. And then the last side is just called your adjacent. A lot of people make mistakes with the adjacent. That's why I always feel my hypotenuse is always standard. But I always feel my opposite first. I always do that first, because then I just know the last side is going to be my adjacent side. So that's how we label this. We're going to do another one. And this time, I'm going to make this smaller. But I'm also going to put the theta on the other side. So our theta is going to be here. This is always going to be our 90-degree angle. That's never going to be a theta, because the opposite would be the hypotenuse, but the longest side always has to be the hypotenuse. So this side again is our hypotenuse. I'm just going to do a hypo. Now we have our theta somewhere else. This is not going to be our opposite. Not anymore, because our theta is right here. We're going to look directly opposite from our theta, and this is going to be our opposite. And then the last side is going to be our adjacent. You have to remember that the longest side, or the side opposite from your 90-degree angle, is going to be your hypotenuse. Once you know that, then the rest is pretty easy. You can figure out your opposite side, which is directly opposite from your theta, and then your adjacent side. So now that we've figured that out, we can now go into what SOH CAH TOA means. So I don't know if you probably heard this before multiple times, but SOH CAH TOA simply is, now the new thing would be your S, your C, and your T in this question. So your S, your C, and the T. S stands for, and this is what we call our trig ratios. So our S stands for sine. and that's a short form. Our C stands for cosine or cos. And our T stands for tangent or tan. So that is what our S, C, and our T stand for. You're just going to have to memorize that. Over time, you're just going to know what that is. And then we have our O and our H. And now, if we go back to this, when we're labeling, you can see we already labeled it as opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Now we're going to need that. Our O is going to stand for opposite. Our H is going to stand for hypotenuse. And our A is going to be adjacent. So for this, to write this out, we're going to have sine. We're going to put theta. The theta is important, right? We use the theta to label, so we need a theta now. We're going to use sine theta and opposite. So it's going to be sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. It's always going to be in the same order. So you see O comes before H, so our opposite is going to be on the top and our hypotenuse is going to be at the bottom. For this one, if you can guess what it's going to be, go ahead. This is going to be cos theta equals AH adjacent over hypotenuse. And then we have tangent theta equals opposite, right, over adjacent. So you can see that H3 trig ratios, they allow for opposite, hypotenuse, and adjacent, right? We can see all three in each one. Okay, so not in each one, but all together. All three are in there. This is the basics of trigonometry. You need to know your sine, your cos, your tangent. There are other trig ratios, but we're not going to get into that today in today's video. This is what we are going to be focused on in today's video. So you might be given questions that you're asked to find your theta, you're asked to find that angle. You're probably going to be given your sides, and you'll be asked to find theta. And so what you're going to do then is you're going to use this formula to decide which one you're going to use. And to decide which formula you're going to use, it's going to depend on what numbers you're given. I'm just going to do not like an example really, but I'm just going to show you what I mean by that. So here we have a triangle. Let's say this is our theta right here. This is our 90-degree angle. That really doesn't matter. And let's say we're given 8 and we're given maybe 10 over here. Now, and we're asked to find theta. The thing, what's going to happen is we're going to label our graph. We know that this is going to be hypotenuse. This is going to be opposite. And it's going to be adjacent. Now, we're not given our opposite, right? So, but we are given our adjacent and our hypotenuse. So we're going to look at what formula has both adjacent and hypotenuse in it. And that's our cos. That's this formula right here. Right? Because our sine doesn't have, and our tangent doesn't have. So our cos theta does have adjacent and hypotenuse. Our sine has hypotenuse but not adjacent, and our tan has adjacent but not hypotenuse. So this is the only one that can work for this. Now, that's what we're going to use to solve it. Okay, we're going to get into actually solving it in a different video. But another thing that I want you to remember would be the Pythagorean theorem, the formula. And we know, you should know that it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Pretty easy. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Let's say, for instance, that you really did not want to use adjacent. Or you just didn't want to use that one in whatever. Or you're asked to find all the sides as well. If you're asked to find all the sides, you could still use this sine, cos, and tangent. You could use that. We're going to get into examples of how to solve that. You could use that to find opposite, for instance, because we're not given opposite. But you could also use your Pythagorean theorem, right, to solve opposite. So this would be your A, maybe your B, and then this is obviously always your C. Your hypotenuse is always your C. And then this one can be interchanged to find what your opposite would be. And then you can decide. And once you find your opposite, let's say this opposite turns out to be a 4. Now we can decide, we can use whatever formula we want. You don't have to use all of them. You can just choose opposite and just plug in the right numbers and solve it. And you can use cos and you can use tangent. So whichever one you want to use now, because you have all your sides completed. One thing that I will say is try to use whatever numbers they give you in the equation, just in case you make an error when you're finding your opposite. So I was given a 10 and an 8. I know for sure that that number is not going to change. But my opposite, I may have made an error. So if I decide to use sine, for instance, sine theta, then what's going to happen is I'm just going to have 8 over 4. Let's say the answer was actually supposed to be 6. Now I'm going to get that wrong. Just a tip. You don't have to follow it, but just a tip. So in the next video, next couple of videos, we're going to go into solving this. Actually using this SOH CAH TOA in an actual example, and how to use it to find angles like your theta, and also how to use it to find your sides. And if you look in your calculator, there is usually, you probably have noticed the sine, cos, and tangent button on your calculator. So this is where this is gonna get handy. Okay, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.